I am Lucy Thompson, 23, and literally last weekend, my so-called strength as the silent survivor of my family's cruelty? Yeah, it backfired. The courage I'd worked my butt off to keep buried deep inside? It blew up into a full-on reckoning at my father's lavish birthday dinner. My father, the respected attorney, demanded I stay quiet, play the perfect daughter for his colleagues. When I refused, the room went dead silent. "You'll destroy us all," my mother hissed, with everyone staring like I'd just set the table on fire. But here's the truth. Their control didn't break me. It lit a spark. I'm not just fighting back, I'm about to flip their world upside down and change everything. A quick note. This story is copyrighted by the YouTube channel Guest Stories. Reposting, revoicing, or editing this content without permission constitutes copyright infringement. Thank you for respecting original creative work. Now, back to the story. 5 years ago, I was 18, standing in my cap and gown, the weight of high school graduation pressing against my chest. I'd made it. Valedictorian, scholarship to NYU waiting, a future I could almost touch. The auditorium buzzed with families, but my eyes kept darting to my parents in the third row. My father, in his tailored suit, smiled for the crowd, his arm around my mother, who waved at someone she knew. To everyone else, they were the Thompsons, pillars of the community, untouchable. To me, they were a storm I couldn't outrun. That night, we were supposed to celebrate at home. I'd cooked dinner. Roast chicken, their favorite, hoping for once they'd see me. Instead, my father's face darkened when I mentioned NYU. "You think you're better than us?" he'd said, his voice low, like gravel crunching underfoot. I stood frozen by the kitchen counter, gripping the edge, my knuckles white. My mother sipped her wine, saying nothing, her eyes fixed on the floor. I tried to explain, to say I just wanted to study journalism, but his hand cracked across my face before I could finish. The pain was sharp, then numbing as I stumbled back, tasting blood. He didn't stop. His fists found my jaw, my ribs, each hit a message: stay small, stay silent. I crumpled to the floor, the room spinning, my mother's heels clicking as she walked away. In the ER later, I lied to the nurse about falling down the stairs. My jaw was wired shut for 6 weeks, and I learned to sip soup through a straw while my parents told everyone I'd been clumsy. But lying there, staring at the ceiling, something shifted. I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was a survivor, and I swore I'd never let them break me again. That night, as pain throbbed through my skull, I made a promise to myself. I'd escape. Not just run the lift, but destroy the cage they'd built around me. The years after were a blur of survival. I stayed home, biding my time, playing the dutiful daughter while my mind churned. My father's law firm thrived, his name in the papers for winning big cases. My mother hosted charity galas, her smile dazzling under chandeliers. I was their shadow, unseen unless they needed to lash out. Every insult, every bruise, I catalogued in my head. I started hiding money, $5 here, 10 there, from babysitting jobs they didn't know about. I'd slip into the library after school, reading about legal emancipation, domestic abuse laws, anything to arm myself. My father's temper grew worse, his hands heavier, but I kept my eyes down, my voice soft, waiting for the right moment. By 20, I had a plan. I'd been accepted to NYU but deferred, claiming I needed a gap year to find myself. Really, I was building a case. I bought a cheap recorder, hid it in my room, and started capturing his rages. Every slur, every threat. I photographed bruises, dated them, stored them in a locked folder on a burner phone. My mother's silence was its own evidence. I noted every time she turned away, every excuse she made. It was slow, agonizing work, like carving a tunnel with a spoon, but each piece of proof felt like a brick in my foundation. Last weekend, everything converged. My father's birthday was coming, a big event at our house, colleagues and cops invited to toast his success. I knew it was my chance. My heart pounded as I packed my evidence, recordings, photos, a journal I'd kept since I was 15, into a small USB drive. I hid it in my pocket, my hands trembling as I dressed for the dinner. I was still their daughter on the outside, but inside, I was ready to burn their world down. As I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of my simple black dress, the one my mother had bought me last year for looking presentable, my mind drifted back to the years that had led me here. The dress felt tight around my neck, like a noose, reminding me of all the times I'd choked down my words, my pain, just to survive another day. I could hear the faint sounds of party preparations downstairs, my mother directing the caterers, her voice sharp and commanding, as if orchestrating a symphony of perfection. But perfection was always for show. Behind closed doors, it was a different tune, one filled with silence, screams, and the kind of invisibility that eats away at your soul. I remembered my 16th birthday like it was yesterday, not because it was special, but because it was the day I realized how truly unseen I was in my own home. I'd come home from school that afternoon, my backpack heavy with books and a report card I was proud of. Straight A's, even in advanced English, where I'd written an essay on domestic secrets that won a school award. I clutched the certificate in my hand, the paper crinkling as I walked through the front door, hoping maybe this time they'd notice. The house smelled of fresh-baked cake, but it wasn't for me. My mother was in the kitchen, frosting a 3-tier monstrosity, her pearls glinting under the lights. "What's this for?" I asked, setting my bag down quietly, not wanting to disrupt her focus. She glanced up, her eyes narrowing slightly as if my presence was an interruption. "Your father's promotion party tonight, big clients coming over." She wiped her hands on a towel, not even asking about my day. I held out the certificate, my fingers trembling a bit. "Mom, look, I won the writing contest at school." She took it, scanned it quickly, then set it on the counter like it was junk mail. "That's nice, Lucy, but help me with these napkins, we need everything perfect." No hug, no smile, just a command. I folded the napkins, my chest tightening, feeling smaller with each crease. That evening, the house filled with laughter and clinking glasses. My father stood at the center, toasting his success, his colleagues slapping him on the back. I hovered on the edges, serving drinks like a ghost. One of his partners, Mr. Reynolds, noticed me and asked, "So, young lady, what are you up to these days?" I opened my mouth to mention the award, but my father cut in, chuckling. "Oh, Lucy's just muddling through school. Nothing special." He ruffled my hair roughly, his grip a little too tight on my shoulder, a warning squeeze. I smiled weakly, excusing myself to the kitchen, where I pressed my back against the fridge, hot tears stinging my eyes. Why bother trying when they made it clear I didn't matter? But that was mild compared to the nights when the facade cracked entirely. Like the time I was 14 after I'd stayed late at the library working on a science project that earned me first place in the fair. I'd rushed home, trophy in hand, bursting through the door. "Dad, look what I—" His face was thunderous, he'd lost a case that day. Before I could finish, he snatched the trophy, examining it with a sneer. This is what you're wasting time on." He hurled it across the room, it shattered against the wall, pieces scattering like my hopes. My mother swept them up without a word, her broom bristles whispering over the floor. "Clean up your mess, Lucy," she said, as if I'd broken it myself. I knelt, picking up shards, a cut on my finger drawing blood that dripped onto the tile. No one asked if I was okay. Those moments piled up, each one a layer of invisibility. My achievements, academic awards, poetry published in the school paper, even a small scholarship for debate club, were dismissed or destroyed, while they paraded their own successes. My father's courtroom victories were framed on the walls, my mother's social events splashed across local magazines. I learned to hide my triumphs, stuffing certificates under my mattress, reading my writings in whispers under the covers. But the psychological barbs were constant. "You're lucky we put up with you," my father would say, his breath hot on my face after a drink too many. My mother's sighs, her averted gaze when I sought comfort, spoke volumes. And then there was the physical side. The hidden wounds that no one saw. It started small, a slap for talking back, a shove for not moving fast enough. By 17 it escalated. One night, after I'd aced a history exam and dared to share it at dinner, my father exploded. "You think you're smart? You're nothing." His fist connected with my arm, bruising it purple. I retreated to my room, locking the door, but he pounded until I opened it, then grabbed my hair, yanking me close. "Don't ever embarrass me like that." My mother watched from the hallway, her arms crossed, saying, "You provoke him, Lucy." I spent the night curled on my bed, ice pack on my arm, vowing to be smaller, quieter. Flashbacks like these flooded me as I finished dressing, the mirror reflecting a face that had learned to mask pain. Downstairs the doorbell rang, the first guests arriving. My hand steadied as I slipped the USB into my purse. The history of my invisibility wasn't just memories, it was fuel. Tonight I'd make them see me, not as their victim, but as the one who ends it all. I took a deep breath, smoothing my dress one last time, and headed down the stairs, each step a countdown to the end of their reign. But as I reached the bottom, my mother spotted me, her eyes critical. "You look tired, Lucy. Try to smile more." I nodded, forcing my lips upward, but inside, the spark from graduation night burned brighter. The party was starting, and so was my unraveling of their perfect lie. The guests' voices rose in a murmur as I descended the last step, my forced smile feeling like a mask glued to my face. My mother nodded approvingly before turning to greet someone at the door, her pearls catching the light like tiny warnings. I weaved through the crowd, nodding politely, my purse heavy with the USB drive that held my future. But as I grabbed a glass of water from the bar, pretending to mingle, my mind yanked me back to that pivotal night 5 years ago, the one that changed everything. The night my jaw broke, but so did their hold on me. I was still in the hospital then, wires holding my mouth shut, the beeps of machines a constant rhythm in my ears. Pain radiated from my face, a dull throb that made thinking hard, but in the quiet hours when nurses weren't checking on me, clarity hit like a freight train. I lay there, staring at the sterile white ceiling, my hands clenching the thin blanket. This can't be my life, I thought, the words echoing in my head, since I couldn't speak them. My father's face flashed before me, his rage, his fists, and for the first time it wasn't fear that filled me, but a cold, sharp resolve. I realized if I didn't act, I'd be trapped forever, just like my mother, silent and complicit. That was the aha moment. It wasn't dramatic like in movies, no lightning bolt or heroic music. It was me, alone in that bed, deciding I wouldn't be their victim anymore. I needed proof, something undeniable, because running away without it meant they'd hunt me down, use his lawyer connections to drag me back, or worse, paint me as the unstable one. My fingers twitched, wanting to write it down, but with my jaw wired, I could only scribble on a notepad the nurse had left. "Document everything," I wrote, the pen shaking in my hand. It was the start of my secret project, my lifeline, hidden in plain sight. Getting out of the hospital was the first hurdle. My parents picked me up, my father gruff, muttering about medical bills, my mother fussing over my appearance. "We'll say it was a car accident," she whispered in the car, her hand on my knee, squeezing too hard. I nodded, but inside the spark ignited. At home, I moved slowly, pretending weakness, but as soon as they left for work, I started. I found an old notebook in my desk, the kind with a lock, and began jotting down memories, dates, times, what he said, what he did. My hand ached from the effort, but each word was a victory. June 4th, slapped for spilling milk, bruise on cheek. Simple, factual, but building. The intense struggle came quickly. Fear was my constant companion. What if they found it? My father had a habit of rummaging through my room, claiming to check for contraband. I hid the notebook under a loose floorboard in my closet, prying it up with a nail file, my heart pounding every time. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, replaying the beating, sweat beading on my forehead. Pain from my jaw made eating agony, but I forced myself to focus. I bought a small digital camera with birthday money they'd forgotten about, hiding it in my backpack. The first photo was of my wired jaw, taken in the bathroom mirror, the flash reflecting my swollen eyes. Click. Evidence. As weeks turned to months, the documentation grew. I endured more abuse, each incident a chance to gather proof, though it tore at me. One night, about 3 months after the beating, my father came home drunk from a firm party. I was in the kitchen, sipping broth when he stormed in. "You think you're so smart, deferring college?" he slurred, grabbing my arm, twisting it until I gasped. My mother watched from the doorway, her wine glass trembling. He shoved me against the counter, my hip bruising instantly. As soon as he passed out, I photographed the marks, my hands shaking, tears blurring the lens. Then, into the notebook. September 12th, arm twisted, bruise on hip. Mother's comment, "You shouldn't provoke him." The struggle wasn't just physical. It was mental. Doubt crept in daily. Am I crazy? Is this normal? I'd second-guess myself, staring at the growing pile of evidence, but then I'd remember the graduation night, the crack of bone, and push on. I learned to record audio on my phone, hiding it in my pocket during dinners. "You're worthless," he'd say, his voice captured clear as day. I transferred files to a cloud account under a fake name, password protected, had my fingers flying over the keys in stolen moments at the library. Years passed like this, the secret building into something massive. By 21, I had hundreds of entries, photos, recordings, a dossier that could bury him. The success was hidden, but real. I'd researched laws, knew about restraining orders, criminal charges for assault. I even contacted a pro bono lawyer anonymously, sending snippets, getting advice. "This is solid," she emailed back. It fueled me. I deferred NYU again, claiming family issues, but really, I was waiting for the perfect moment, his birthday, when his world was watching. The pain of enduring was immense. Each new bruise meant another photo, but also another piece of my soul chipped away. I'd cry in the shower, hot water mixing with tears, fists clenched against the tiles. "Why me?" I'd whisper. But then I'd dry off, square my shoulders, and add to the file. The internal battle raged. Fear versus fury. Fear made me hesitate. Fury made me meticulous. I organized everything chronologically, backed up on multiple drives, hidden in places they'd never look, like taped inside air vents. One particularly bad night, 2 years in, tested me hardest. My father found a journalism book I'd borrowed, accused me of plotting against him. He beat me worse than graduation, kicks to my stomach, leaving me vomiting blood. My mother cleaned it up, saying, "He didn't mean it." I recorded her words from my room, then photographed the damage. Lying in bed, gasping, I almost gave up. But the aha echoed. Document, escape. I added it all, the evidence now irrefutable. By last year the project was complete, a timeline of terror, ready to deploy. The success? Knowing I had power. It wasn't just files, it was my reclaimed voice. Back at the party, a colleague bumped into me, spilling wine on my dress. "Sorry, dear," he said. I smiled, dabbing it off, but inside I was steel. The spark had become a blaze. As laughter filled the room, I clutched my purse, the USB a weapon. The struggle had been hell, but the hidden success? It was my ticket out. The wine stain spread across my dress like a blooming bruise, but I brushed it off with a napkin, my fingers pressing hard into the fabric as if I could erase it along with everything else. The colleague mumbled another apology, his cheeks flushed, before drifting back into the crowd. I stood there for a moment, the glass of water in my hand growing warm, the chatter around me a distant hum. This was it, the present day, the culmination of years, with my evidence poised like a loaded gun in my purse. The party was in full swing now, guests milling about our spacious living room, crystal glasses clinking, laughter echoing off the high ceilings. But for me, it was the eve of judgment, the hours before I pulled the trigger, and every second ticked like a bomb. I glanced at the clock on the mantel, 7:45 p.m. Dinner would start soon, then speeches, toasts to my father's greatness. My heart raced, but I kept my face neutral, sipping the water slowly to steady myself. I'd been on the verge of this for weeks, finalizing the plan in secret. Last night, alone in my room, I'd reviewed everything one last time. The USB drive held folders organized meticulously, audio, photos, journal entries. I'd added a final video that morning, recording my father's curt order for me to behave tonight or else, his finger jabbing the air inches from my face. Click, saved. It was the last piece, making the case airtight. Now, with police contacts I'd researched, detectives not in his pocket, and his colleagues here as witnesses, the exposure would be swift, devastating. But reluctance gnawed at me as I moved through the room, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet. Part of me still wanted to run, to slip out the back door and disappear without the confrontation. I paused by the buffet table, picking up a small plate, loading it with cheese and crackers I had no intention of eating. My hands trembled slightly, the plate rattling, so I set it down, clenching my fists at my sides. Why now? I thought, eyes darting to my father across the room. He was holding court, his laugh booming, hand on a partner's shoulder. To them, he was the hero attorney, defender of justice. To me, he was the monster who'd shattered my jaw, my trust, my childhood. Preparing for this had been a nightmare of its own. All day I'd helped set up, my mother barking orders, "Lucy, arrange the flowers higher, make it look elegant." I'd nodded, my stomach churning as I adjusted the vases, petals brushing my fingers like fragile lies. She'd eyed me suspiciously when I excused myself to the bathroom, but I'd locked the door, checked the USB in my pocket, whispering to myself, "This ends tonight." The deal, the exposure was life-changing. His arrest, my freedom, a new start in New York. But the dread was real. What if it backfired? What if his friends rallied around him, called me a liar? I leaned against the table now, my back straight, forcing a smile as a guest passed by. My mind raced through the plan again, step by step, like a rehearsal. During the toast, when everyone was gathered, I'd stand, project the files on the TV. We had a smart setup for presentations. I'd emailed backups to the pro bono lawyer and a trusted teacher from high school, with instructions to release if anything happened to me. Safety nets. But standing here, the weight of it pressed down. I avoided eye contact with my mother, who was flitting between groups, her dress swishing, perfume trailing like a smokescreen. She caught my gaze once, her lips thinning, and I looked away, focusing on a painting on the wall. A serene landscape that mocked our chaos. A wave of nausea hit me, and I set the water down, my palms sweaty against the glass. Reluctance surged. This was my family, twisted as it was. Destroying them meant destroying parts of myself. I thought of NYU, the journalism program, waiting, how I'd use my voice for others. That pulled me back. I straightened, smoothing my dress over the wine stain, micro movements to calm, deep breath in, hold out. A colleague approached, Mrs. Harlan, her earrings dangling as she tilted her head. "Lucy dear, how are you, still at home?" Her tone was pitying, her eyes scanning me like a project. I nodded, my voice steady despite the knot in my throat. "Yes, helping out." She patted my arm, her rings cold against my skin. "Well, family first, right?" She moved on, and I exhaled sharply, fingers digging into my palms. The dread built, but so did determination. This dinner wasn't just annual, it was his crowning glory, the perfect stage. I glanced at my purse on a side table within reach, the USB inside like a heartbeat. As the caterers announced dinner, guests began drifting to the dining room. My father called out, "Lucy, come sit by me," his voice commanding, eyes locking on mine with that familiar warning. I picked up my purse, slinging it over my shoulder, the strap biting into my skin. Reluctance faded as I walked toward him, each step deliberate. The verge was here, life-changing, terrifying. I'd prepared relentlessly. Mental checklists, escape routes mapped in my head, a packed bag in my car trunk for after. No turning back. Seating myself beside him, I felt his hand on my shoulder, heavy, possessive. "Smile, Lucy," he murmured, breath warm on my ear. I did, but my free hand slipped into the purse, fingers brushing the drive. The table filled, silverware clinking, conversations flowing. My mother at the other end, raising her glass in a preliminary toast. "To family," she said, her eyes avoiding mine. I raised mine too, water sloshing slightly. Inside, the plan locked in. Wait for the main speech, then act. The meal began, plates passed, but I barely touched my food, fork pushing salad around, mind on the files. A forkful hovered near my mouth, but I set it down, wiping my lips with the napkin, folding it precisely. Dread mixed with adrenaline, my leg bouncing under the table. This was the eve, the quiet before the storm. Soon, everything would change. The salad fork scraped against my plate as I pushed a leaf of lettuce around, the metallic sound barely audible over the hum of conversation at the long dining table. Candles flickered in their holders, casting shadows that danced across the faces of my father's colleagues, their smiles polished like the silverware. I sat rigid next to him, my shoulder brushing his occasionally as he gestured animatedly, his voice booming about a recent case win. The initial facade of normalcy hung thick in the air, a veneer I knew wouldn't last. But for now, I endured it, my hands folded in my lap, nails digging into my palms to stay grounded. A woman across from me, Mrs. Caldwell, one of the senior partner's wives, leaned forward, her diamond necklace catching the light as she tilted her head toward me. "So Lucy, what are you up to these days?" Her voice was syrupy sweet, laced with that condescending curiosity reserved for the offspring of important people. I glanced up, meeting her eyes, which held a mix of pity and expectation. My father paused mid-sentence, his fork hovering over his plate, waiting for my response. I swallowed, my throat dry despite the sip of water I'd just taken. "I'm planning to start college soon," I said softly, keeping my tone neutral, not wanting to provoke yet. She nodded slowly, her lips pursing as if tasting something sour. "Oh, still at home? That's quaint. Most girls your age are out exploring the world." Her husband chuckled beside her, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Yes, Lucy, you must be quite the help around here." The words landed like subtle jabs, backhanded compliments wrapped in concern. I felt my cheeks heat, but I forced a small smile, nodding. I like being close to family. My mother at the far end caught my eye briefly, her gaze sharp, a silent warning to play along. She raised her glass to her lips, hiding whatever expression lurked behind it. The barrage continued as the main course arrived, filet mignon, the scent rich and heavy. Mr. Reynolds, seated to my right, turned to me, his breath carrying the tang of red wine. "Tell us, Lucy, any boyfriends, or are you too busy with whatever it is you do?" He laughed at his own joke, his hand slapping the table lightly, causing my water glass to tremble. I shifted in my seat, the chair creaking under me, my free hand clutching the napkin in my lap, twisting it tighter. "No, sir. Focusing on my studies." My voice was steady, but inside, anger simmered. These weren't innocent questions, they were probes, designed to highlight my failures, to make me small in front of them. My father joined in, his hand landing on my shoulder again, fingers squeezing just enough to remind me of his strength. "Lucy's our little homebody, isn't that right?" He turned to me, his eyes locking onto mine, the smile not reaching them. It was a veiled threat, coded in paternal affection for the audience. I nodded, my head dipping slightly, avoiding his gaze by focusing on my plate. The steak knife in my hand felt heavy as I cut a small piece, the blade slicing through the meat with a soft tear. Chew, swallow, repeat, mechanical actions to mask the rising tension. Across the table, another colleague, Mr. Harlan, piped up, his fork gesturing toward me. "You know, my daughter just graduated from Harvard Law, top of her class. You should think about law school, Lucy. Follow in your old man's footsteps." His wife nodded enthusiastically, her earrings swaying. "Yes, dear, it's never too late to get serious about a career." The implication hung there, that I wasn't serious, that my deferred dreams were laziness. I set my knife down carefully, the clink against the plate louder than intended. "Journalism interests me more," I murmured, but Mr. Harlan waved it off. "Ah, writing stories? That's cute. But law is where the real impact is." Laughter rippled around the table, light but cutting. My mother's voice cut through, smooth as silk. "Lucy has plenty of time, she's been such a help at home." Her eyes met mine again, colder this time, her foot nudging mine under the table, a subtle kick hidden from view. I pulled my leg back, my calf brushing the table leg, the wood cool against my skin. The condescension piled on, each remark a layer pressing down. A younger associate, Miss Patel, tried a kinder approach. "It's great you're taking your time, self-discovery is important." But even that felt patronizing, her smile too bright, as if I were a child lost in the woods. I endured it all, my responses short, my eyes downcast when possible. My father leaned in at one point, his whisper hot against my ear, "Don't embarrass me tonight." His breath carried whiskey, his fingers digging into my arm briefly before releasing. I winced inwardly, but kept my face blank, nodding imperceptibly. The questions kept coming, about my hobbies, my plans, each one laced with judgment. "Still no job?" someone asked. "Volunteering at the library," I replied, but they moved on quickly, uninterested in details. As dessert plates were set down, chocolate mousse decadent and untouched by me, the initial gauntlet peaked. Mrs. Caldwell circled back. "You must feel so lucky to have parents like yours, such role models." Her hand fluttered to her chest, dramatic. I gripped my spoon, the metal warming in my palm, stirring the mousse without eating. "Very lucky," I echoed, the word tasting bitter. My father beamed, but his foot pressed against mine under the table, a firm push, another veiled threat. The endurance was exhausting, each micro-action a battle, steady breathing, unclenching my jaw, keeping my hands visible but still. Inside, the USB in my purse burned like a secret fire, reminding me this facade was temporary. The barrage had set the stage, their contempt fueling my resolve. As coffee was poured, the aroma strong, I straightened slightly, ready for the next phase. But for now, I sat through it, the initial torment a familiar storm I weathered one condescending word at a time. The coffee steamed in its delicate china cup before me, the dark liquid swirling as I stirred it absent-mindedly with a small silver spoon, the clinking a rhythmic distraction from the building tension. Conversations around the table had shifted from casual jabs to more pointed discussions about family legacies and expectations, with my father at the helm, his voice growing louder, more authoritative. I kept my eyes on the cup, tracing the rim with my finger, feeling the warmth seep into my skin, but my ears tuned in sharply to every word, waiting for the inevitable turn. It started subtly, as these things often did in our house, veiled under the guise of concern. My mother cleared her throat delicately, her napkin folded precisely in her lap, and leaned forward slightly, addressing the table but directing her words at me. "We've been thinking a lot about the future lately," she began, her tone measured like she was delivering a prepared speech. Heads turned toward her, the room quieting a fraction, forks pausing mid-air. My father nodded beside me, his hand resting on the tablecloth, fingers drumming lightly, a habit that always signaled his impatience. "Yes," he interjected, his voice booming to reclaim the spotlight. "Family is everything, but it requires commitment, loyalty." He turned his head toward me, his eyes narrowing just enough for me to notice, the candlelight reflecting in them like sharp points. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I didn't flinch, keeping my posture straight, my hands now clasped under the table to hide the slight tremble. The guests murmured agreements, someone saying, "Hear, hear," but their faces showed mild confusion, sensing the shift in tone. My mother continued, her pearls shifting as she straightened her shoulders. "Lucy, we've supported you through everything, but it's time you stood on your own." Her words hung there, polite but laced with finality. I looked up then, meeting her gaze across the expanse of the table, her expression a mask of composed regret. Supported? The word twisted in my gut like a knife. Supported through beatings, through silence, through years of making me doubt my own sanity. I opened my mouth to respond, but my father cut in, his hand slamming down on the table with controlled force, rattling the cups. "Exactly," he said, his voice dropping to that low, menacing register I knew too well, the one that preceded storms behind closed doors. "You've been living off us long enough. Deferring college, wasting time with your little dreams. Journalism? Please." He scoffed, glancing around the table for support, and a few uneasy chuckles followed, though Mrs. Caldwell shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting away. "As of tonight, that's over. You're cut off. No more allowance, no more roof over your head unless you shape up." The words landed like punches, each one deliberate, meant to humiliate in front of his audience. Cut off. Disowned, essentially, though he didn't use the word. I felt the blood drain from my face, but not from shock. I'd anticipated something like this, their way of tightening the leash one last time. My hands unclenched under the table, one slipping toward my purse at my feet, fingers brushing the zipper. The guests exchanged glances, the atmosphere thickening, conversation stalling. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. Now, Thompson? Family matters perhaps best discussed privately?" But my father waved him off, his face reddening slightly, the vein in his forehead pulsing. "No, this is the perfect time. Everyone here knows the value of tough love." He turned fully to me now, his chair scraping back a fraction as he leaned in, his breath hot and laced with wine. "You've been nothing but a disappointment, Lucy. Ungrateful, always stirring trouble." His finger pointed at me accusingly, hovering inches from my chest. I could see the tiny scar on his knuckle from where he'd hit a wall once, missing me. "Pack your things tomorrow. Find your own way. Maybe then you'll appreciate what we've given you." My mother nodded in agreement, her hands folded primly, but her knuckles were white, gripping each other tightly. "It's for your own good, dear," she added, her voice softer, almost pleading, but her eyes held no warmth, just a flicker of fear, that I might cause a scene. The table was silent now, silverware abandoned, guests staring at their plates or exchanging awkward looks. Miss Patel whispered something to her neighbor, but it was lost in the heavy air. I felt their eyes on me, pitying, judging, the humiliation burning in my chest like acid. Inside, rage boiled, but I kept it contained, my breathing steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth, a technique I'd learned from online articles on surviving abuse. This was their formal announcement, the verdict delivered with an audience to amplify the shame. Disowned. Cut off. The words echoed in my head, but instead of breaking me, they solidified my resolve. My hand fully gripped the purse now, pulling it onto my lap slowly, unobtrusively, as if adjusting my position. The USB inside felt like a talisman, heavy with truth. I spoke then, my voice calm, quieter than his, but it cut through the silence. "Is that really what you want, Dad? To throw me out?" He snorted, leaning back, arms crossing over his chest. "It's what you deserve." The guests shifted, uncomfortable, one coughing into his napkin. My mother interjected, "Lucy, not here," her foot nudging mine again under the table, harder this time, her heel digging into my ankle. I pulled away, the pain sharp but fleeting. The escalation peaked as my father stood slightly, his chair pushing back, napkin tossed onto his plate. "This dinner is to celebrate achievement, not coddle failures. You're done here." His words were final, a judge's gavel in his own court. The room held its breath, waiting for my tears, my submission. But I didn't cry. I met his eyes, my hand unzipping the purse quietly, fingers closing around the drive. This was the deepest cut they'd made in public. But it would be their last. The conversation had escalated from condescension to outright rejection, the formal disowning hanging like a decree. My heart pounded, but my mind was clear. As he sat back down smug, reaching for his coffee, I prepared to shatter the illusion. The steam curling up like a final taunt, I felt the moment crystallize. The deepest humiliation they'd inflicted, broadcast to his inner circle, but also the pivot where everything flipped. My hand, already in my purse, closed around the USB drive, the small plastic edges pressing into my palm like a key to freedom. The table remained hushed, guests fidgeting with their napkins or sipping drinks to fill the awkward void, their eyes avoiding mine, pity etched in their furrowed brows. My father's smirk lingered, his fingers wrapping around the coffee cup, lifting it slowly to his lips, confident in his dominance. I stood then, my chair scraping back with a sharp screech that cut through the silence, drawing all eyes to me. My legs felt steady despite the adrenaline surging through my veins, my heart hammering against my ribs like a drumbeat urging me on. "Wait," I said, my voice clear, louder than before, echoing slightly in the dining room. My father paused, cup midway to his mouth, his eyes narrowing in warning. "Lucy, sit down," he hissed, his free hand clenching into a fist on the tablecloth, knuckles whitening. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out the USB, holding it up like evidence in one of his courtrooms, the small device glinting under the chandelier lights. "This," I began, my breath even, though my throat tightened with years of suppressed rage, "is what you've really given me." Confusion rippled across the faces around the table, Mrs. Caldwell's eyebrows shooting up, Mr. Reynolds shifting uncomfortably, his chair creaking. My mother leaned forward, her hand reaching out as if to stop me, fingers extended, but I stepped back, out of reach. "For years you've painted this picture of the perfect family. But it's a lie." I moved to the sideboard where the remote for the TV sat. Our dining room had a large screen for family movie nights that never happened, and picked it up, my fingers pressing the power button firmly. The screen flickered to life, a soft hum filling the room. My father slammed his cup down, coffee sloshing over the rim, staining the white tablecloth brown. "What the hell are you doing? Sit down now!" His voice rose, commanding, the tone that usually made me shrink. But not tonight. I plugged the USB into the TV's port, my hand steady though sweat beaded on my forehead. The menu popped up, folders listed, audio recordings, photos, journal. Gasps escaped from a few guests as I navigated with the remote, clicking on the first photo folder. The screen filled with an image, my face at 18, jaw swollen, wired shut, bruises blooming purple and yellow around my eyes. "That's from graduation night," I said, my voice cracking slightly for the first time, but I pushed through, pointing at the screen with the remote. "When you broke my jaw because I wanted to go to college." The room erupted in murmurs, heads turning to my father, whose face had drained of color, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Lucy, that's not," he started, but I clicked next. Another photo, my arm twisted at an odd angle, skin mottled with fingerprints. This was because I spilled a glass of water. Click. A recording played, his voice booming from the speakers. "You're worthless, you hear me? I should have never had you." The words hung in the air, raw and undeniable. My mother stood now, her chair tipping back with a thud, her hands clutching the table edge, nails digging into the wood. "Turn that off! This is private!" But the guests were transfixed, horror dawning on their faces. Mr. Harlan whispered to his wife, "Is this real?" She nodded slowly, hand over her mouth. I kept going, my finger pressing the remote harder, advancing through more images, bruises on my ribs, a split lip, dated and time-stamped. "I've documented everything, years of abuse, but psychological, physical, and Mom, your silence is here too." I opened an audio file, her voice faint but clear. "You provoke him, Lucy, just stop." The revelation unfolded like a tidal wave, each click unveiling the scale of their crimes, the hidden terror behind the facade. My father's colleagues stared, some standing, others frozen. Ms. Patel pulled out her phone, perhaps to record or call someone, her fingers tapping rapidly. "This is assault," Mr. Reynolds muttered, his voice shaking, eyes locked on a particularly gruesome photo of my back, striped with belt marks. "Multiple counts." My father lunged forward then, trying to grab the remote from my hand, his face twisted in fury, arms swinging. But I dodged, stepping behind a chair, the wood barrier between us. "Don't touch me," I warned, my voice steel. In that precise moment of chaos, I pulled my phone from my pocket, the screen lighting up as I dialed the number I'd memorized. The direct line to Detective Harris, one not in my father's pocket, researched months ago. "I'm calling the police," I announced, pressing send, the ringtone audible in the stunned silence. My father's eyes widened, panic replacing rage. "You can't. Lucy, stop this now." But the call connected. "Detective Harris? This is Lucy Thompson. I'm at my home, exposing evidence of abuse by my father. I have witnesses. Please come immediately." I rattled off the address, my voice calm, though my knees threatened to buckle. The external event, the call, changed everything, revealing the true extent of what I'd endured, the evidence irrefutable on the screen. Guests whispered urgently, some moving toward the door, others confronting my father. "Is this true, Thompson?" Mr. Harlan demanded, his finger pointing accusingly. My mother sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face, mascara running, her hands covering her ears as another recording played, my cries from a beating, muffled but heart-wrenching. The police sirens wailed in the distance minutes later, growing louder, a symphony of justice. I hung up, pocketing my phone, the remote still in my grip. My father slumped in his seat, defeated, his hands trembling as he rubbed his face. The deepest humiliation was his now. The scale of my success, the gathered proof, laid bare. I'd called, and the world shifted. The sirens grew louder, piercing the night outside, blue and red lights beginning to flash through the dining room windows, casting erratic shadows across the stunned faces around the table. Guests rose haphazardly, chairs scraping back, murmurs turning to urgent whispers as they distanced themselves from my father, who sat frozen, his hands now flat on the table, palms down, as if bracing for impact. The TV screen still displayed a frozen image of one of my bruises, the evidence hanging there like an accusation no one could ignore. My mother crumpled into her seat, her hands covering her face, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, mascara-streaked tears dripping onto the tablecloth. Chaos erupted in waves, the family's stunned scramble unfolding right before me. My father finally moved, pushing back from the table with a jolt, his face a mask of desperation as he turned to his colleagues. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, his voice cracking for the first time I could remember, hands gesturing wildly. "She's unstable, always has been. Mental issues, you know." He looked around for support, but Mr. Reynolds stepped back, shaking his head, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "Thompson, those photos, the recordings, that's not a misunderstanding." Others nodded, Miss Patel already on her phone, perhaps alerting the firm or documenting the scene, her fingers tapping furiously. My mother lifted her head then, her eyes red-rimmed, pleading as she reached across the table toward me. "Lucy, please, stop this. We're family, we can talk about it privately." Her voice trembled, hands extended, fingers quivering like she might grab me if close enough, but it was too late for pleas. Guests milled about, some heading for the door, coats in hand, whispering, "I can't believe it. And we had no idea." One woman, Mrs. Harlan, paused by me, her hand lightly touching my arm, a brief squeeze of solidarity before she hurried out. I stood there, remote still in one hand, phone in the other, watching their hypocrisy unravel. Calm washed over me, a stark contrast to their panic. My breaths even. Shoulders relaxed for the first time that evening. "Family?" I echoed, my voice steady, turning to my mother. "You mean the kind where you watch him beat me and do nothing? Where you tell me it's my fault?" I set the remote down carefully on the sideboard, the click audible in the tension. She flinched, pulling her hands back, clutching them to her chest. We were trying to help you," she whispered, but her eyes darted to the windows, where police cars pulled up, doors slamming outside. My father tried again, rounding the table toward me, his steps unsteady, hand outstretched as if to confiscate the USB still plugged in. "Lucy, turn that off. We'll fix this. I'll get you help, therapy, whatever you need." His tone shifted to bargaining, the lawyer in him kicking in, but sweat beaded on his forehead, his tie askew. I sidestepped, keeping the chair between us, my hand raised in warning. "Help? Like the help you gave me on graduation night? Or all the times you called me worthless?" I gestured to the screen, where the evidence looped silently now, a slideshow of horrors. Guests gasped anew at each image, one man muttering, "Jesus, how long has this been going on?" The scramble intensified as knocks pounded on the front door, police arriving. My mother stood, rushing to my father's side, clutching his arm, her nails digging in. "Tell them it's a mistake, dear. We can say she fabricated it." Her whisper was frantic, but loud enough for nearby guests to hear, earning disapproving shakes of heads. Mr. Harlan confronted them directly. "Fabricated? Those dates match up. And the audio? That's your voice, Thompson." My father shoved him away lightly, but the push was desperate, his balance off, stumbling back a step. I exposed their hypocrisy calmly, each word deliberate, like laying out cards in a winning hand. "You've built your lives on lies. Dad, the great attorney fighting for justice while abusing your own daughter. Mom, the socialite hosting charities for battered women, ignoring the one in your home." I paused, letting it sink in, my eyes scanning the room. Guests nodded slowly, some pulling out phones to record. The gravity settling. My mother's face crumpled further. "We love you, Lucy. This will ruin us." Her plea was raw, hands wringing now, twisting her rings. "Love?" I replied, my tone even, stepping toward the door as the knocks grew insistent. "Love doesn't leave bruises, it doesn't silence screams." My father lunged one last time, grabbing for my arm, but I yanked away, the motion sharp, his fingers grazing my sleeve. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled under his breath, but the room heard, eliciting sharp intakes of breath. That was the final nail, the mask fully off. With the police entering now, badges flashing, voices authoritative. "Everyone stay where you are," I made my powerful exit. I handed the USB to Detective Harris as he approached, his face grim but determined. "Here's the evidence," I said simply, my hand steady as I passed it over. He nodded, glancing at the screen. "We've got it from here, Miss Thompson." Guests parted for me, murmurs of "be strong and good for you" following. I walked out the front door, past the flashing lights, my purse over my shoulder, keys in hand. My packed bag waited in the car trunk, a small suitcase with essentials, ready for this moment. The cool night air hit my face, refreshing as I unlocked the door, sliding into the driver's seat. Behind me, chaos reigned, my father's protests, my mother's sobs, police reading rights. But I didn't look back. Starting the engine, the hum vibrating through me, I drove away, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror. The hypocrisy rejected, their scramble futile. I'd exposed it all, calmly, and now, freedom stretched ahead. The highway stretched out before me as I drove into the night, the city lights of New York growing brighter on the horizon, a beacon pulling me forward from the wreckage I'd left behind. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles still white from the adrenaline, but as miles accumulated, tension eased, replaced by a quiet emptiness. I'd done it. Exposed them, walked away, but freedom felt raw, like skin after a bandage ripped off. Sirens faded in the rearview, and I focused on the road, the engine's hum a steady companion. By dawn I'd checked into a cheap motel, my suitcase unpacked in a room that smelled of stale coffee, but it was mine, no locks turned by others. A year passed in a blur of rebuilding, but one moment stood out, a warm contrast to that toxic dinner, shared with the people who'd become my chosen family. It was a crisp autumn evening in New York, leaves crunching underfoot, as I walked to the small apartment in Brooklyn where my mentor, Professor Elena Ramirez, lived. She'd been my high school English teacher, the one I'd confided in anonymously years ago, sending snippets of my journal. Now, as a journalism student at NYU, she was my advisor, and more, a guide through the healing. I'd invited her and a couple of classmates, Sarah and Miguel, for a casual dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and wine, to celebrate my first published article in the school paper, about survivors of abuse finding their voices. The door buzzed open, and I climbed the stairs, the aroma of garlic and tomato sauce wafting down as I approached. Elena greeted me with a hug, her arms strong and enveloping, the kind that didn't demand anything in return. "Lucy, come in. You look great. Her smile was genuine, eyes crinkling at the corners, no hidden judgments. I stepped inside, shedding my coat, the warmth of the space wrapping around me like a blanket. The apartment was cozy, bookshelves overflowing, a small table set with mismatched plates and candles flickering softly, not for show, but for comfort. Sarah was already there, stirring the sauce at the stove, her ponytail swinging as she turned. "Hey, star journalist, heard your piece got rave reviews." She wiped her hands on a towel before pulling me into a quick side hug, her touch light, but affirming. Miguel lounged on the couch, strumming a guitar idly, but he set it down to high-five me. "Proud of you, Luce. That article? Powerful stuff." Their words landed softly, building me up without the backhanded edge I'd known for so long. We weren't blood, but they'd chosen me, and I'd chosen them. Alliances forged in shared late-night study sessions, coffee runs, and honest talks about our scars. As we sat around the table passing bowls of spaghetti, the conversation flowed easy. No undercurrents of tension. Elena raised her glass of red wine, the liquid swirling ruby in the light. To Lucy, for turning pain into purpose. We clinked glasses, the sound bright and clear, and I felt a lump in my throat, but it was gratitude, not fear. I twirled pasta on my fork, the strands wrapping around, and took a bite, savoring the homemade flavor, a far cry from the stiff performative meals at home. "Thanks, everyone. It means a lot," I said, my voice steady, eyes meeting theirs without flinching. Sarah leaned in, her elbow on the table, chin in hand. "Tell us about the writing process. What inspired that ending? The part about rewriting your chapter." I set my fork down, wiping my mouth with a napkin, folding it neatly before speaking. "It came from last year after everything blew up. I realized I didn't have to live their story anymore." They nodded, listening intently, no interruptions or dismissals. Miguel shared his own tale then, about leaving a controlling family in Mexico, his hands gesturing expressively, fingers splaying to emphasize points. "It's like shedding skin, right? Hurts, but you're freer after." The evening unfolded in genuine moments, laughter over spilled sauce, Sarah dabbing at a spot on the tablecloth with a wet cloth, her movements quick and unapologetic. Elena passed around dessert, apple pie she'd baked, the crust flaky and warm. As we ate, talk turned deeper. Healing from trauma, setting boundaries. "You've come so far," Elena said, her hand covering mine briefly, a gentle press before releasing. No possession, just support. It contrasted sharply with that dinner, the contemptuous questions, the disowning verdict. Here, no one probed for weaknesses, they celebrated strengths. Miguel strummed his guitar again, soft chords filling the room as we cleared plates, stacking them in the sink with soapy water running. Sarah washed, I dried, our shoulders bumping companionably. "You're not alone anymore?" she murmured, passing a plate, water dripping from its edge. I nodded, towel absorbing the drops, the fabric soft against my fingers. Back at the table, we lingered over coffee, steam rising in lazy curls. Elena shared advice on my next assignment, her pen sketching notes on a napkin, ink bleeding slightly into the paper. As the night wound down, hugs at the door felt like anchors. Sarah's quick embrace, Miguel's pat on the back, Elena's longer hold. "Call if you need anything," she said, her eyes warm. Walking home under streetlights, the air cool on my cheeks, I felt the difference viscerally. The toxic biological ties had been chains. These chosen ones were wings. No facades, no hidden bruises, just authenticity, healing in small, real ways. That moment, replayed in my mind during quiet times, a balm against memories of the dinner's venom. It wasn't grand, but it was true, showing me family could be built, not endured. In New York, amid classes and deadlines, these allies grounded me, their warmth a shield as I navigated the aftermath. The autumn leaves had given way to winter's bite by the time the legal aftermath truly hit, snow blanketing the New York streets in a hush that mirrored the quiet I'd imposed on my old life. I'd been in the city for months now, my small studio apartment a sanctuary of stacked books and a single window overlooking a bustling avenue, but the calls started coming. First sporadic, then insistent. My mother's number flashing on my phone screen during a lecture on investigative journalism, the vibration buzzing against my thigh like an unwelcome touch. I ignored it, focusing on the professor's words, my pen scratching notes across the page, ink flowing in steady lines as I jotted down tips on source protection. But ignoring wasn't enough. The voicemails piled up, her voice pleading through the speaker when I finally listened in the privacy of my room, curtains drawn against the gray sky. One evening, as sleet tapped against the window pane like impatient fingers, I decided to confront it head-on. A single conversation to establish the fortress of my new boundaries, rules that would protect the fragile peace I'd built. I sat on my bed, the mattress dipping under my weight, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the call button. My heart raced, but not with the old fear. This was controlled, deliberate. I pressed dial, the ringtone echoing in my ear, each trill a countdown. She answered on the second ring, her voice breathless. "Lucy? Oh, thank God, I've been so worried." I took a deep breath, the air cool from the draft seeping through the window frame, and steadied myself, fingers tracing the pattern on my quilt, a simple geometric design grounding in its repetition. "Mom," I said, my tone flat, no warmth to invite her in. "We need to talk about this. The calls, the messages, they stop now." There was a pause on her end, the faint sound of her shifting, perhaps sitting down, a chair creaking in the background. "But Lucy, your father's trial is coming up. We need you to reconsider. Testify for us, say it was exaggerated." Her words hung there, a desperate grasp at the old dynamic, but I felt the walls I'd built solidify. I stood up, pacing the small room, my socks whispering over the hardwood floor, each step measured. "Reconsider? You mean lie? Like you did for years?" My voice rose slightly, but I reined it in, stopping by the window, pressing my palm against the cold glass, the chill seeping into my skin. She sighed, long and weary. "It wasn't like that. We were a family. Mistakes were made, but he's your father. The scandal, it's destroyed us. No more invitations, the firm dropped him. Please, for me." I pulled my hand back, wiping the condensation on my jeans, the denim rough under my fingers. This was the aftermath. His arrest that night leading to charges. Assault, battery, years of evidence stacking against him like a house of cards collapsing. The trial loomed, subpoenas served, my testimony requested by the prosecution. But her pleas were the real battle, attempts to breach my defenses. "No," I said firmly, returning to the bed, sitting on the edge, my free hand clenching the quilt. "I'm not testifying for him, and if you keep contacting me, I'll block you. This is my rule, no more manipulation, no more guilt trips." She started crying then, soft sobs filtering through the line, her voice muffled as if covering the receiver. "How can you be so cold, after everything we've done for you?" I closed my eyes, the familiar guilt flickering, but I extinguished it, focusing on my breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, chest rising and falling steadily. "What you've done, you mean the silence while he hurt me, the excuses?" I opened my eyes, glancing at the stack of journalism textbooks on my desk, reminders of my new path. "I'm healing, Mom, without you. If you want any contact in the future, it has to be on my terms. Apologize, acknowledge what happened, no demands." The conversation dragged, her responses cycling through denial. "It wasn't that bad," to bargaining. "We'll pay for your tuition, just come home." Each time I countered calmly, my voice unwavering, though my leg bounced slightly, foot tapping the floor in a muted rhythm. "No, tuition's covered by scholarships. And home? That was never safe." Micro-actions marked the exchange. Her pauses growing longer, her tone shifting from pleading to resigned, sniffles punctuating her words. I adjusted the phone against my ear, the plastic warming from my skin, and set another boundary. "Emails only if you must. No calls. And nothing about Dad unless it's an apology from." She tried one last push, her voice hardening. "You're destroying our family. Is that what you want?" I stood again, walking to the kitchenette, pouring water into a glass, the faucet running cold and clear. I took a sip, the liquid soothing my dry throat. The family was already destroyed, by you two. I'm building my own now. Click. I ended the call, setting the phone down on the counter with a soft thud, my hand lingering on it for a moment, fingers curling and uncurling. In the silence that followed, relief washed over me, mixed with a pang of loss. But the boundaries felt solid, a fortress erected brick by brick. I handled the aftermath this way: selective responses to legal queries, therapy sessions twice a week where I unpacked the call, my therapist's nods encouraging as I described the exchange. No more voicemails after that. She switched to emails, sparse and tentative, testing the waters. I replied once, reiterating the rules, my fingers flying over the keyboard, each key press assertive. Establishing these new rules wasn't just words, it was action. changing my number eventually, forwarding legal correspondence through my lawyer, the pro bono one who'd become a steady ally. In class, I channeled it into assignments, writing about boundaries and survivor stories, my pen gripping tighter during emotional parts. The conversation with my mother was the linchpin, a primary event that defined my engagement, limited, protected, on my terms. As snow continued to fall outside, I curled up with a book, pages turning slowly, the rustle a comforting sound. The aftermath raged on, trial dates set, media whispers about the fallen attorney, but my fortress held, boundaries unbreached. Healing was slow, but in that call I'd claimed my ground, rules etched in stone. Winter melted into spring, the snow giving way to budding trees along the NYU campus paths where I walked daily with a backpack slung over my shoulder, filled with notebooks and a laptop that had become my tools for change. My journalism classes buzzed with energy, discussions on ethics and impact. But one assignment stood out. A feature article on domestic abuse survivors turning their experiences into advocacy. It was my chance to channel the past into something positive, reclaiming the Thompson name not as a mark of shame, but as a banner for resilience. The primary event was the day I interviewed a fellow survivor for the piece, a meeting that crystallized my legacy on my own terms. I'd arranged it at a quiet coffee shop near Washington Square Park, the kind with worn wooden tables and the scent of fresh brews mingling with rain-damp air from a recent shower. My hands fidgeted with the strap of my bag as I waited, fingers twisting the fabric, nerves bubbling despite the therapy sessions that had taught me to name them. Her name was Aria, a woman in her 30s who'd escaped a similar hell, now running a support group. She arrived punctually, her umbrella dripping as she shook it out by the door, spotting me with a warm smile that reached her eyes. No pity, just recognition. We ordered lattes, the barista's steamer hissing in the background as I set up my recorder on the table, the small device clicking on with a soft beep. "Thanks for meeting me," I started, my voice steady, pulling out my notebook, pen uncapping with a click. She nodded, stirring her drink, the spoon clinking against the ceramic mug. "Of course. Your email said you're a survivor too. That takes guts to write about." Her words settled me, and I leaned forward, elbows on the table, the wood grain rough under my skin. The interview flowed from there, her story unfolding in measured tones, years of control, the breaking point, the rebuild. I jotted notes furiously, my handwriting looping across the page, capturing details, the way she'd hidden bruises with makeup, the fear of speaking out. "How did you start helping others?" I asked, my pen pausing, hovering over the paper. She sipped her latte, foam clinging to her upper lip before she wiped it away with a napkin, folding it neatly. "It started small, a blog post, then group meetings. Using my voice reclaimed what he took." Her eyes met mine, steady, and I felt a kinship, nodding as I wrote. As she spoke, I shared bits of my own, the documentation, the exposure at the dinner, the move to New York. Not for sympathy, but to connect, my words careful, measured. "I deferred college to build the case," I said, my finger tracing the rim of my mug, the ceramic warm. "Now, in journalism, I want to amplify stories like ours." She reached across, her hand covering mine briefly, a gentle press before withdrawing. "You're doing it, this article? It'll help someone." The touch was affirming, no demand behind it. We delved deeper, her anecdotes vivid, a woman who'd left after reading her blog, another finding legal aid through her network. I recorded it all, the device's red light steady, while outside pedestrians hurried by, umbrellas blooming against fresh drizzle. My questions probed gently. What challenges post-escape? And she answered honestly, her hands gesturing, fingers splaying to emphasize isolation, financial hurdles. I mirrored her, my own gestures opening up, arms uncrossing as trust built. Midway, emotion surged when she described her first advocacy event, voice cracking slightly. I paused the recorder at her nod, giving space, my hand offering a tissue from my bag, the paper soft as she dabbed her eyes. "It's okay," she said, crumpling it in her fist. We resumed, the conversation turning to impact, how sharing rewrites narratives, turns victims into victors. "The name, whatever it was before, becomes yours," she said, and it hit home. Thompson, once a curse, now mine to redefine. The interview wrapped after an hour, my notebook filled, pages flipping back as I reviewed key quotes. We stood, hugging briefly, her coat damp against me, exchanging contacts. "Send me the draft if you want feedback," she offered, her card slipping into my pocket. I nodded, smiling genuinely, the expression pulling at my cheeks. Walking back to campus, rain pattering on my umbrella, I felt empowered. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Using my success, the escape, the studies to create ripples. Back in my apartment, I transcribed the interview, fingers flying over keys, the laptop screen glowing in the dim light. Words poured out, weaving her story with mine anonymously, highlighting resources, hotlines. The article grew, paragraphs building like layers of armor. I edited meticulously, cursor blinking as I cut redundancies, my mouse clicking to bold key phrases. Submitting it to the school paper felt monumental, the send button pressed with a decisive click. When published, feedback flooded, emails from readers, classmates' nods in halls. One message stood out, a girl saying it gave her courage to speak. I printed it, tacking it to my wall, the paper curling slightly at edges. Reclaiming my legacy meant this: positive impact. The Thompson name linked to hope, not horror. In classes I pitched more stories, my hand raising confidently, voice clear. Therapy helped process, but this event, the interview, was the turning point, solidifying my path. Even the trial's shadow, my father's conviction months prior, a guilty plea to lesser charges, community service instead of jail due to his connections, didn't dim it. I testified via video, words factual, no emotion betrayed, camera lens cool under my gaze. But advocacy was my focus. Groups like Aria's where I volunteered, sharing tips on documentation, my hands demonstrating phone apps for recording. The interview lingered, a primary realization in action. My voice helped others, rewriting the family script on my terms. Spring bloomed fully, and so did I, the legacy mine, forged in ink and truth. Spring's bloom carried me into summer, the New York heat waving off sidewalks as I navigated the city, my steps lighter with each passing day, the weight of the past easing like a fading scar. Classes wrapped up for the semester, leaving me with time to reflect, and one quiet afternoon became the anchor for my final realization. The moment where I truly grasped that my worth was internal, a self-validation that brought profound peace. It wasn't dramatic, no epiphany under fireworks, but a solitary walk in Central Park, the kind where the world buzzes around you yet you're enveloped in your own thoughts. I'd packed a simple lunch, a sandwich from the deli near my apartment, wrapped in wax paper that crinkled as I carried it in my tote bag, along with a worn journal I'd started post-escape. The park was alive, joggers pounding paths, families picnicking on green lawns, the distant bark of dogs chasing frisbees. I found a bench under an oak tree, its leaves rustling in the breeze, providing dappled shade that danced across my skin. Sitting down, the wood warm from the sun, I unwrapped the sandwich, taking a bite, the bread soft, turkey and cheese melding in familiar comfort. But eating was secondary. The journal called to me. I pulled it out, the cover leather soft from handling, pages filled with entries from the last year. Rants about the trial, joys of published articles, fears of slipping back into old patterns. My pen, clipped to the spine, uncapped with a click, and I began writing, ink flowing across the lined paper in fluid strokes. Today, a year since the dinner, I started, the words forming deliberately. Memories flooded. The clinking glasses, the condescending questions, the revelation of evidence, sirens wailing. My hand paused, fingers gripping the pen tighter, knuckles whitening as I recalled my father's face, twisted in defeat, my mother's pleas. But as I wrote, something shifted. I described not just the pain, but the growth. The allies like Elena and Aria, the boundaries set in that phone call, the impact of my advocacy. I did that, I scrawled, underlining it twice, the pen pressing hard enough to indent the page. Not because of them, but despite them. The realization built slowly, like dawn creeping over the skyline. My worth wasn't tied to their approval or the world's pity. It was in my actions, my resilience, the voice I'd honed. I set the pen down, leaning back against the bench, the slats pressing into my back, grounding me. A squirrel scampered nearby, pausing to eye my sandwich crumbs, its tail twitching. Internal thoughts swirled. Why did I endure so long? But then compassion for my younger self, the girl with the wired jaw documenting in secret. You survived, I whispered aloud, the words carried away by the wind. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sorrow but release, blurring the park's greens and blues. I wiped them with the back of my hand, skin salty against my lips. Self-validation meant forgiving myself for staying, for hoping they'd change, and celebrating the escape. My worth was intrinsic, a flame that burned regardless of their shadows. I flipped through earlier pages, fingers tracing entries, the first NYU class, nerves making my hands shake as I raised them to speak, the interview with Arya, her words mirroring mine, volunteer sessions where survivors thanked me, their hugs brief but meaningful. Each was a brick in my foundation built by me. The park's sounds faded, the laughter of children, the hum of traffic, as I closed the journal, snapping it shut, the elastic band securing it with a soft thwop. Peace settled, deep and quiet, like settling into a warm bath after a long day. Standing, I stretched, arms reaching skyward, muscles loosening, then slung the tote over my shoulder, the strap adjusting with a pull. Walking the path, gravel crunching under my sneakers, I felt unburdened. The sun filtered through leaves, warming my face, and I smiled at a passerby, the expression natural, unforced. This reflection wasn't just musing, it was a turning point, realizing external validation from family society was fleeting but internal? Eternal. Months later, as fall approached again, this peace sustained me. The trial's echoes, my father's probation, my mother's distant emails, were footnotes now. In therapy, I discussed it, my therapist nods affirming as I articulated, "I'm enough as I am." She smiled, pen tapping her notepad. Advocacy continued, my articles reaching more, but the drive was personal fulfillment, not proof. That park bench moment lingered, a touchstone. I'd return sometimes, sitting in the same spot, journal in lap, but less for venting, more for gratitude. "Thank you, self," I'd write, the pen gliding smoothly. Peace wasn't absence of pain, but harmony within it. My worth, internal and unshakable, freed me fully from the past shadow. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through my story. It's been a wild ride, hasn't it? From that nightmare of a family dinner to finding my footing in New York, it's all about breaking free and rewriting your own path. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic people to reclaim your life? Or maybe you've turned a painful experience into something that helps others. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did I handle the exposure right? Or would you have done something different? So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Drop a comment below sharing your take. And if you've got a similar story, spill the tea. We're all in this together. Don't forget to like if this resonated, and subscribe to guest stories for more real-life tales of triumph and turnaround. Your support means the world, and remember, your worth is inside you, not defined by anyone else. Keep shining, and let's inspire each other to write our best chapters yet. Thanks again, talk soon.